When I moved back into my childhood home, the air felt thicker than I remembered, like something was waiting for me in the silence, something old and patient. My mother had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital just a week earlier after suffering a complete mental collapse, the kind that leaves you staring into corners and whispering things no one wants to understand. I hadn't been home in nearly 2 years, and when I stepped inside, nothing looked exactly as I remembered it. The walls were the same color, the furniture hadn't moved an inch, but the entire house felt like it was pretending to be normal, like it was holding its breath. My little brother, Daniel, met me at the door with wide eyes and a smile that didn't quite touch the fear buried deep in his pupils. He was only 7, too young to understand the weight of what was happening, yet old enough to carry the kind of dread that should never live in a child's body. That very night, as I unpacked my bag in my old bedroom, Daniel walked in holding a crumpled sheet of paper and said, "Mr. Whisper wanted me to give you this. He said it's your turn now." I unfolded the drawing with a hand I hadn't realized was trembling, and what I saw made me freeze, not because it was grotesque or bloody, but because it was simple in the worst possible way. 3 stick figures stood side by side. One was obviously Daniel, labeled in his messy handwriting with "me," and the second was me, slightly taller with black scribbles for hair and a red shirt just like the one I was wearing. The third figure had no name, no eyes, no face, just an empty oval head and a line for a mouth curved into something between a grin and a gash. Its body was blacked out entirely with pencil, except for the hands, which were long, spindly, and drawn reaching toward the figure that represented me. I tried to laugh, to brush it off as just a product of an overactive imagination twisted by the trauma of losing our mom to madness. But Daniel's next words lodged themselves into my spine like a knife made of ice. "He says you used to see him too. But you forgot. He doesn't like being forgotten." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed with my eyes wide open, every creak of the old house echoing in my skull like a scream behind a wall. At some point past midnight, I heard whispering faint, rhythmic, and distinctly childlike coming from Daniel's room across the hall. I assumed he was talking to himself again, the way he'd apparently been doing since our mother got sick. But then I noticed something that made my stomach twist into a knot I couldn't untangle. There were 2 voices. One was clearly Daniel's, soft, uncertain, and innocent. But the other voice was deeper, too low for a child, and full of something I can only describe as static made human. It wasn't speaking in words, not exactly. It sounded like someone gargling a secret through broken teeth. I stood up, heart slamming against my ribs like a trapped animal, and crept down the hallway. The closer I got, the colder the air became, as if the hallway itself disapproved of me being there. I placed my hand on Daniel's door, intending to open it slowly, but before I could even turn the knob, the voices stopped, instantly, unnaturally, like they knew I was listening. And then came the knock, from inside the room. 3 slow taps on the other side of the door. When I opened it, Daniel was sound asleep, breathing calmly. But the closet door behind him? It was open, just a crack, and inside, I swear I saw something move. Something that didn't belong to the world I thought I knew. The next morning felt wrong before I even opened my eyes. You ever wake up and immediately feel like something was watching you the entire night? Not in a dream, not in a nightmare, but in reality? That was the feeling coiled tight in my chest as I stepped into the kitchen and found Daniel already at the table, sketching with a stack of crayons and a focus that looked far too intense for a 7-year-old. He didn't even look up when I walked in, didn't say a word. Just kept scribbling line after line like the paper would burn him if he stopped. I poured myself some cereal and tried to shake the unease, but then I glanced at what he was drawing, and I felt the spoon slip right out of my hand, clattering loudly on the counter like a gunshot in a church. The page was filled with crude, but recognizable images: a tree in our backyard, our wooden fence, and something lying limp near the bushes. I leaned in closer, heart already pounding, and saw it clearly. It was our dog, Max, sprawled out, eyes crossed out with thick black excess, tongue lolling from his mouth like a cartoon corpse. But Max was fine. Max was alive. He was scratching at the back door not 10 minutes earlier. I asked Daniel what the picture meant, and he finally looked up at me, his voice as flat as an old cassette tape left too long in the sun. "It's what's going to happen. Mr. Whisper said it's your warning." That night, I found Max dead. No sign of struggle. No wounds. No reason. Just curled up near that exact same spot by the fence, motionless and stiff, like someone had hit pause on his life and forgotten to press play again. I buried him before Daniel could see. I wanted to pretend it was just a horrible coincidence, a one-off tragedy with no connection to the drawing, no connection to that name that kept creeping back into every dark corner of our lives, Mr. Whisper. But something deep down told me that wasn't the truth, and by the time I reached for my phone and called the hospital where they were keeping my mom, I think a part of me already knew what I was going to hear. I asked the nurse if I could speak to her, and after some convincing, they brought the phone to her room. She sounded hollow, like a person speaking through the memory of themselves. But when I mentioned Daniel's imaginary friend, the line went dead silent. Then, without warning, she began to scream. Not cry. Scream. A blood-curdling, throat-tearing scream that made the nurse snatch the phone back and hang up without a word. But I'd heard enough. Right before she lost it completely, she gasped out something in a whisper, so soft I barely caught it. He's not imaginary. He remembers you. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. My thoughts were spinning too fast, circling back to every strange thing I'd ever ignored in that house. But around 3 a.m., when I finally laid down, exhaustion managed to drag my eyes shut for just a while. When I woke up, the sun hadn't even risen yet, but Daniel had already left another drawing outside my bedroom door. I picked it up with hands that weren't quite steady anymore, bracing myself for whatever horror waited on the other side of the paper. This time, it was a picture of me, lying in my bed, blanket pulled to my chest, mouth slightly open, exactly how I'd looked a few minutes ago. And beside me, standing tall and thin and faceless, was him. No eyes. No features. Just that same sick, slashed mouth and those long hands, one of them reaching out toward my face like it was about to touch me. Scribbled beneath in uneven, childlike letters was one sentence that made me feel like my blood turned to frost. He likes watching you sleep. The game has rules. I didn't know that until this morning, when I found Daniel sitting cross-legged on the living room carpet, staring at the unplugged television. His lips moved like he was whispering a secret, but no sound came out. I asked him what he was doing, and this time, he answered me slowly, deliberately, like someone reading instructions carved into stone. You can only look at him in mirrors, he said without turning his head. You can't talk about him when the lights are off. And never, he paused, his voice hitching like something inside him didn't want him to go on. Then, just barely above a whisper, never say his name 3 times. I didn't laugh. I didn't roll my eyes. There was something in Daniel's face that drained every trace of warmth from the room. He wasn't playing pretend. He was repeating something he'd memorized, something taught. I sat down across from him and asked if Mr. Whisper told him these rules. Daniel nodded. He made me play. If you don't play, he gets mad. My stomach tightened like a fist. I asked what happens if you lose. He didn't answer. Just slowly turned his head toward the darkened TV screen, and for the briefest moment, I thought I saw something move in the reflection, something tall and still and not either of us. The rest of the day crawled by in a kind of warped silence. Every noise felt sharper, every shadow looked longer, and even the air had a thickness to it that made it hard to breathe. I didn't let Daniel out of my sight. I even unplugged every mirror in the house except the one in the bathroom, just in case this rule about reflections was more than a kid's imagination. Around midnight, I was brushing my teeth with the bathroom door cracked open, trying to shake the awful tension building behind my eyes, when I noticed something wrong in the mirror. It was subtle at first, like the light was bending differently, like the air inside the glass wasn't quite matching the room I was standing in. Then I saw it, a figure, standing in the far corner behind me. I froze. I didn't move a muscle. It didn't either. But I swear to you, its body was facing away, but its head was turned completely around, facing the mirror. Not me. Just the mirror. Staring into it. Watching me. Every instinct screamed for me to turn around, but something deep, ancient in my bones told me not to. I blinked once, and it was closer. Just slightly. No footsteps. No sound. Just closer. I dropped my toothbrush, and when I looked back up, it was standing directly behind me. Still motionless. Still wrong. And still not real, at least. That's what I told myself as I slammed the bathroom door shut and locked it. I sat on the floor, heart punching my ribs, trying to remember every detail Daniel had told me. The rules. The warnings. The things I wasn't supposed to do. And then it hit me, I'd already said his name out loud, twice. Once when I called the hospital, once again when I asked Daniel about him this morning. I clamped a hand over my mouth, as if the name itself was some kind of trigger. But in my panic, I started whispering to myself. Mr. Whisper, Mr. Whisper, what the hell is happening to me? The moment the words left my lips, I felt the air shift. Like pressure dropping before a storm. like the house itself had taken a breath. My mouth stayed open in horror as I realized what I'd just done. 3 times. I said his name 3 times. A coldness crept up the back of my neck, a chill not of this world, and from behind the locked door, on the other side of the mirror, came a slow, deliberate sound. Not knocking. Scraping. Fingernails dragging across the glass. And then a whisper, almost tender. Now you can see me. I woke up in the woods. Cold, barefoot, shivering under a sky full of stars I didn't recognize, with a metallic taste in my mouth and dried blood beneath my fingernails. My throat burned like I'd been screaming, and clenched in my hand, tight enough to tear the edges, was a crumpled piece of notebook paper. I remember sitting up, my heart hammering like a warning bell, and slowly unfolding it with stiff, shaking fingers. It was a drawing. A child's drawing, the kind Daniel might have scrawled in a rush, a stick figure lying in a rectangular box, scribbled over in black crayon. Beside it, another figure, bigger, standing, with a long, impossibly wide smile drawn in red ink. Above it, written in a shaky, almost frantic hand, "Bury him deep so he can't scream." I stared at it until my eyes burned. There were no roads nearby, no flashlight, no memory of how I'd gotten there. Only a creeping, nauseating feeling that I had drawn it, and worse, that it wasn't just a drawing. My feet were muddy. My arms were scratched. I checked my phone. It was 4:12 a.m., and I had a 15-minute video saved under recent recordings. I didn't remember starting any video. My hands trembled as I hit play. The screen lit up with darkness, grainy, night vision static from my phone's camera. The frame shook, and after a few seconds, I realized the footage was coming from my own bedroom. The phone was recording from the top of the dresser, propped up awkwardly, as if someone had set it there on purpose. At first, the room was still, just the soft hum of the heater and the occasional creak of the old walls. Then I saw myself enter the frame. But it wasn't me. The person in the video had my face, my clothes, but not my posture. He moved too slowly, too smoothly, like a marionette whose strings were pulled by hands that didn't understand human anatomy. He walked to the bed across the room, Daniel's bed, and just stood there. For minutes. Completely still. Then he leaned down, almost lovingly, and began whispering. The audio was grainy and faint, but I could just barely make out the words. "Do you see how easy it is? And you don't have to be afraid anymore." My voice, but not my voice. My mouth moving, but saying words I'd never say. Suddenly, Daniel sat up. Eyes wide, face pale in the green night vision glow. He didn't scream. He didn't move. He just turned toward the camera, looked straight into it like he knew I'd be watching, and said something that turned my blood to ice. "You're his now." I dropped the phone. I didn't even feel it hit the floor. My whole body went numb. I stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp, barely able to breathe. That wasn't a dream. That wasn't sleepwalking. That was something else. Something using my skin like a costume. I checked my arms, my legs, my face in the mirror. Everything looked normal, but I didn't feel normal. There was something inside me, behind my eyes, watching me watch myself. The mirror fogged slightly, though I hadn't taken a shower. I stared at my reflection, and for one horrifying second, my lips moved, but I didn't feel them move. They formed words I didn't say. "He's almost done with you." Then everything in the house went silent. The heater stopped. The lights dimmed. I turned around, instinctively, and found Daniel standing in the hallway, barefoot, holding a shovel. I hadn't slept in 2 days. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt him standing over me, not Daniel, not some intruder, but him. The whispering thing that wore my voice and borrowed my face. My skin itched like something was trying to crawl out of it. So I did the only thing that made sense in my unraveling mind. I started digging. Not outside, inside. Our house is old, built by my grandfather, and every room felt like it was watching me now. I tore through the attic, the crawl space, the walls behind closets. I smashed through sealed cabinets I'd never noticed and ripped up floorboards in the master bedroom. That's where I found it. A locked chest buried beneath dust and cobwebs, hidden between the joists under the floor. It looked like it hadn't been opened in decades, maybe longer. The lock was rusted, but when I touched it, it fell open like it wanted me to look inside. Inside the chest were old photographs, brittle drawings, crumpled children's clothes, and at the bottom, wrapped in waxed paper, a thick leather-bound journal that smelled like rot and ash. The cover had no name, just a scratched-in symbol that made my stomach twist when I stared at it for too long. I opened it with trembling fingers. The first page read, "If you're reading this, it's already inside you." The journal was my mother's. Her handwriting was slanted, neat at first, but it deteriorated with each page, as if her sanity had been peeled away line by line. She wrote about him. Always him. She called him Mr. Whisper, and my blood ran cold. She said he was never born. He was found, buried in the walls of a home no one remembered building. Every 7 years, he returns. Every time a child in our family turns 7, he comes to play. My mother thought she had stopped it when she was young. She said she performed the ritual, the binding using the family bloodline and a mirror covered in river mud. But she also wrote that it wasn't perfect. It only slowed him down. He moved through dreams, through reflections, through the lies children tell to make imaginary friends seem real. And he was clever. He knew when to wait. Knew how to infect the cracks in our memories. According to her, every child in our bloodline had drawn him without knowing, the tall man with no eyes and too many teeth. I dropped the journal when I read the line, "He always comes for the youngest first." Daniel just turned 7 last week. I was shaking when I looked back into the box. Beneath the journal, wrapped in an old towel, was a stack of faded Polaroids, family photos from decades ago. I flipped through them slowly, barely breathing. My mother as a teenager. My grandparents smiling stiffly at a table. Me, at maybe 5 years old, grinning with a popsicle in hand. And then, I froze. One photo didn't make sense. It was me, maybe 6 or 7, standing in the backyard behind this very house. I was holding someone's hand, but there was no one else in the picture. Just a long shadow stretching from where the other person should be. No body. No face. Just that dark, unnatural silhouette, too thin, too tall, like it had been drawn onto the grass. I don't remember that day. I don't remember that photo being taken. I don't remember ever having an imaginary friend. But in the photo, I was smiling up at him. And behind my smile, in the corners of my eyes, I saw it now. Something was already wrong with me back then. Something was already inside. I never noticed the seam in the basement wall until the lights began flickering again, that same rapid blink, 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 like a warning in Morse code. The air was colder down there now, damp like breath against glass. I'd gone down to look for something, anything, to calm myself after reading my mother's journal. Instead, I found it. The wall opposite the furnace had always looked like solid stone, but when the light hit it just right, I saw the outline, a narrow rectangle carved perfectly into the brickwork, almost invisible under a layer of white paint. My heart sank before I even touched it. The door wasn't locked. It opened with a groan like something inhuman exhaling after holding its breath for a century. Dust swirled around my feet, and behind that hidden door was a staircase leading downward, a place even beneath the basement. Each step creaked like it didn't want to remember what was waiting below. And when I reached the bottom, I froze. The room was small, windowless, and freezing. Every inch of the walls was lined with old mirrors, not hung, but fused directly into the stone. Most of them were cracked, splintered like spider webs across glass. The air smelled like iron and mildew. And scratched into nearly every mirror, in desperate, frantic strokes, was the same phrase, "Don't let him in." I turned in a slow circle, my reflection shattering and duplicating 1,000 times over, each fractured piece of me twitching slightly out of sync. Something about the room made it impossible to feel alone, even when I knew I was. I should have left right then. I should have slammed the door, burned the house to the ground, and run until the wind forgot my name. But then I heard Daniel's voice. It echoed from deep inside the mirrors, not muffled, clear. "Come play," he whispered, his tone soft and playful, the way he spoke when he used to tug on my sleeve and ask for bedtime stories. But I knew he was upstairs. I had tucked him into bed an hour ago. I felt something shift behind the glass. I leaned in, holding my breath. My reflection leaned too, but only one of them. All the other reflections mimicked me as they should, but one remained perfectly still. Its head didn't tilt when mine did. Its shoulders didn't rise when I inhaled. It just stared at me. Its face, not quite mine. The eyes were darker. The mouth was just slightly wrong, like someone had drawn me from memory but forgot what a human should look like. And then it smiled. Slowly, hungrily. I stumbled back, and all the mirrors screamed. A sharp, high-pitched screech of shattering glass that filled the room without a single pane breaking. I clutched my ears as the air turned heavier, pressing down like invisible hands. The walls began to pulse, like a heartbeat trapped in concrete. The voice came again, but this time it wasn't Daniel's. It was mine, but stretched and twisted, like someone was pulling my vocal cords through a meat grinder. "You already let me in," it said. And that still reflection began to move, not mirroring me, but stepping closer inside the glass, as though there was no barrier at all. I backed toward the stairs, heart jackhammering against my ribs. The lights above me blinked again, once, twice, then went out. I was left alone in total darkness, surrounded by the sound of breathing behind the mirrors. And just before I ran, something brushed against my hand. Cold, thin, like fingers made of shadow. I bolted up the stairs, not daring to look back. But before I slammed the hidden door shut, I saw one last thing. Every mirror, all at once, showed the same thing. A door opening in Daniel's room. After this incident, I decided to visit my mom. I never wanted to go back there. The St. Eliza Psychiatric Institute loomed like a mausoleum carved into the hillside. All gray stone and iron windows, the kind of place where silence wasn't peaceful. It was forced. I hadn't seen my mother in over a year, not since she stopped responding to anything at all, not since she began staring at corners like something was watching her from the inside. But after what I saw in the mirror room, after hearing my own voice whisper things I never said, I knew I needed answers. Real ones. The kind she might be too broken to give, but I had to try. The nurse led me to the observation room. She's not usually responsive, she warned, opening the door with a clank that made me flinch. My mother sat by the window, her thin frame wrapped in layers, rocking slightly. Her eyes were half closed, mouth slack. I stepped closer, unsure what to even say. "Mom, it's me," I whispered. "Nothing." I reached for her hand. The moment our skin touched, her head snapped around with such sudden violence, I jumped back. "You brought him with you," she hissed. "He's still hungry." Her voice wasn't dreamy or confused like before. It was sharp, lucid, terrifying. Her eyes, for just a moment, were crystal clear, locked on mine like she was seeing me and something behind me at the same time. She gripped my hand tighter than I thought she could. "You need to take Daniel and leave this place," she said, each word shaking like it cost her something. "It's not your fault. You were never meant to carry it." I asked her what she meant. My voice cracked. She leaned in so close I could feel her breath on my cheek. "You were supposed to be the last. I gave everything to stop it. The rituals, the fire, the drowning dreams, but it found a way back through him." Her eyes darted to the side again. "I tried to close the door. I tried to burn it shut. But he opened it. And now it's inside the house again." I couldn't breathe. My mind raced with flashes of everything I'd ignored. The drawings Daniel made, the whispers through the vents, the thing in the mirror. "What is it?" I asked. She shook her head violently. "Not what, who," she said, her lips trembling. "It needs a body, a name, a lineage. It's always the children. That's the deal. That's the curse." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And now it's him." Before I could ask more, she went completely still. Her eyes widened. Her jaw dropped open, but no sound came. Her gaze fixed somewhere behind my shoulder. The silence in the room was deafening, like all the sound had been pulled out by a vacuum. Then she screamed. A raw, high-pitched sound that didn't seem to come from her throat, but from somewhere deeper. Her body convulsed as she clawed at her face, tearing her nails across her skin as she shouted, "He's behind you." I spun around, but no one was there. Just an empty corner with peeling wallpaper and the shadow of my own silhouette on the floor. But for a second, a fraction of a second, my shadow moved before I did. I backed away as the nurses rushed in, holding her down as she shrieked like an animal caught in a trap. I stood frozen, her voice echoing in my skull long after the room fell silent again. One nurse looked at me like I'd brought something with me, and maybe I had. When I turned to leave, I passed a mirror in the hallway. My reflection stood there, still, then smiled. I don't know what's happening to me. I can feel it, creeping through my veins like a slow poison. Sometimes, I wake up and forget where I am, as if I've never left this house. The walls feel familiar, suffocating, like they're pressing in from all sides. The house is alive, alive with memories I didn't think I had. At night, when I close my eyes, I hear whispers, faint, unintelligible at first, then clearer as the days go on. It's him. It's Mr. Whisper. But now, in these flashes of memories, I see him as a child, just like me. A younger version of himself, standing in the corner of my old room with those eyes. Black, shiny, and endless. How can a memory be real if it never existed? How can I remember him when I never knew him? I was just a kid, but he was already there, watching me. His voice was soft, but I remember feeling his presence pressing into the air. I remember the way his grin stretched too wide. That's when I knew something was wrong. But now, as I lie awake in my own bed, I don't know if I've ever really left. Have I been here all this time? Or did I just come back? That night, after I left the psychiatric hospital, it was like the air in the house had thickened. The smell of rot hung heavier in the corners of the rooms, and the shadows stretched unnaturally long. I heard Daniel moving around upstairs, but it didn't sound like him. It wasn't his footsteps, and it wasn't his voice when I called out. I went up to check, but his door was locked. I knocked. No answer. I don't know why, but I felt the pull. The same pull I'd felt when I first saw the mirror, the one I thought was behind me. When I turned, I found myself standing in the hallway, staring at a mirror I didn't recognize. It wasn't the usual one in the hallway. This one was darker, the glass almost misted. But what caught my attention was what was inside, or rather, who. It was me standing there, but not quite right. The reflection wasn't my eyes. They were darker, hollow, empty. And I was smiling. Not just smiling, grinning. Grinning like something inside me was finally set free. I turned and looked over my shoulder, half expecting to see him there. But there was no one. I ran to Daniel's room, desperate to wake him, desperate to shake him awake and tell him we were leaving, that we were going right now. But when I opened the door, there was no one there. His bed was empty. My heart slammed against my ribcage. Where the hell was he? His things were still there. His toys, his clothes. Everything exactly where it was supposed to be. But my brother was gone. There was no trace of him. Panic clawed up my throat, and I rushed through the house, calling his name. Daniel. Dan. Nothing. And then I saw it. A mirror in the living room, another one I didn't remember. This one was small, tucked behind a bookcase. But when I stepped closer, I froze. I saw us, but not the real us. Our reflections standing side by side. But the eyes. His eyes, my brother's eyes, were reversed, and the smile on his face was twisted, unnaturally wide, as if it were pulling at the corners of his lips. And I wasn't any better. My smile was stretched, teeth glinting in the dark, but my eyes. They weren't my eyes. They were his eyes. Mr. Whisper's eyes. I stumbled back, my breath hitching in my chest. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The reflection in the mirror didn't move with me. It just stood there, watching, waiting. And somewhere behind me, I swear I heard a faint, familiar whisper, "It's time." The room was dark, the air heavy, but I had a plan. I had to stick to the rules. I knew what I had to do to get him. Mr. Whisper had played his game, pulling me deeper into this nightmare, twisting my memories, making me question reality. But I wasn't going to let him win. Not this time. I found the diary, my mother's old journal, buried beneath the floorboards, just like she'd written. There were rules there, hidden within the madness of her scrawlings. A nursery rhyme, something from her childhood, an incantation that trapped Mr. Whisper in mirrors. The mirrors had always been his domain, his twisted world. I had to use it against him. I lined them up around me, reflections, reflections, reflections. And then, I said the words, as my mother had written them. At midnight's hour, the game begins. A child's heart, a fate that spins. Mirror, mirror, take him, hold. The twisted one, his heart turned cold. The air around me thickened, a shift in the room like the air had just turned electric. The mirrors began to hum, almost alive, pulling the darkness toward them. I could feel him, Mr. Whisper, his presence growing stronger, but I was ready. I knew this was my chance. I could feel the entity struggling, fighting against the trap I had set, but I had done it. I had outwitted him. I was finally free. I had won. The room fell silent. The mirrors shimmered, reflecting nothing but darkness. I collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily, expecting some kind of release, some sign that the game was over. But when I heard the sound of sirens in the distance, I thought it was over. I had won. I had trapped him. The police arrived not long after. They combed through the house, their flashing lights cutting through the dark. They asked me questions. What happened? Where was my brother? I led them upstairs, my heart pounding in my chest, praying they'd find him, that everything would be okay. But when they opened the door to Daniel's room, there was nothing. Nothing but his drawings scattered across the floor, the same drawings I had seen before, the ones of a faceless friend. They asked if I had seen my brother. I didn't know what to say. I don't know, I whispered, my voice shaking. They looked at me, their eyes filled with suspicion. But I knew in my heart. He was gone, and I had failed. The last thing I remember from that night was walking away from the house, leaving the city behind. I couldn't stay. Not after everything that had happened. Maybe leaving was my only chance to stay alive. I don't know how far I drove, hours, days. It didn't matter. The city felt like a dream, a nightmare, and I wasn't about to be its next victim.